I've dug graves for 27 years. Rain, snow, heat, it doesn't matter. The dead don't care about weather, and the living always expect the hole to be ready by morning. I used to tell myself there was comfort in routine. That digging was honest work, that the silence of the dead was easier than the noise of the living, but that was before I saw her hand move, the first time I thought I imagined it. A pale, limp hand pressing ever so slightly against the inside of the coffin lid. It was dusk. My lantern flickered. Maybe it was the shadows playing tricks, or maybe I'd been working too many hours. I told myself that. Repeated it in my head until I believed it, and I filled the grave. But the next morning the mound of dirt was off, flattened more than it should have been. There were boot prints, my own, yes, but others too. Smaller, lighter, unfamiliar. That night I returned with a shovel and shame tightening in my chest. I told myself I was mad, foolish, disrespectful, but I dug anyway. The coffin hadn't shifted. The nameplate still read E. Marin Delcourt, 22. Died of fever, quiet, no family but a brother who never came to the funeral. Everything should have been still, but her arms were crossed the wrong way. I remember that detail clearly because I was the one who placed them. It's part of the final right, right over left, hands folded over the heart. But now, it was left over right, subtle, wrong. I didn't open the lid. I couldn't. I just stood there, staring, waiting for something to move again. But it didn't. Not that night, still, I didn't fill the grave back up either. I left it open, because part of me needed to see if she'd move again. And the worst part, she did. I returned the next night with 2 shovels, one for digging, the other for defense. Ridiculous, I know. What was I going to do, duel a corpse? But the silence in the cemetery wasn't the kind I was used to. It was thick, heavy. Not the peace of the dead, but the pause before something breathes in. When I reached her grave, the soil was untouched, perfectly smooth, like no one had ever disturbed it, which didn't make sense. I hadn't filled it. There should have been a gaping pit waiting for me, but now it was pristine. Pressed flat like someone had smoothed it over by hand, or something. I didn't move for a long time. I just stared at the grave, at the cold marble slab with her name etched deep enough to last 100 winters, Marin Delcourt. Beneath it, I knew the coffin was still there, but I didn't know what would be inside anymore. Not really. Eventually, I couldn't help myself. I started digging again, this time slower, more careful, as if I were unwrapping something delicate. Something sacred or cursed. It took nearly an hour to reach the lid. My hands were blistered. My breath fogged the night air, but I didn't stop, and when I pried the coffin open, her eyes were open, not wide, not screaming, just open. As if she'd never closed them in the first place. Her arms were back to right over left, but there was dirt under her fingernails, dark, packed, fresh, and on the inside of the coffin lid were scratch marks. I stumbled back, fell on the edge of the pit, and nearly rolled in. I didn't scream. I should have. I didn't fill it again that night. I didn't close the lid. I just climbed out and walked backward, one slow step at a time, never taking my eyes off her face. She didn't blink, but she wasn't in the same position anymore either. One hand had moved, just a little, resting now on her stomach, as if waiting. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat in my small quarters behind the chapel, lamp burning low, hands still caked in dirt I hadn't bothered to wash off. The image of Marin's open eyes haunted every corner of the room, each flicker of shadow a reminder. Each breath I took felt borrowed, like I was breathing the air meant for someone else. At sunrise, I went looking for her brother. He was the one who arranged the burial, paid in full. Didn't even haggle, which should have been my first clue something wasn't right. I found him at the edge of town, outside his woodshop, sawing clean through a pine board like the world hadn't shifted the night before. I stood there for a moment, watching him, trying to read the lines in his face. There was something hollow in his eyes, like he'd already seen too much and didn't care to see more. When he noticed me, he wiped his hands and nodded, polite but guarded. "Back for your payment." "No," I said, "I need to ask about Marin." His jaw tightened. "She's dead," he said, blunt as a hammer. "There's nothing more to say."
What?
I told him about the grave, about the untouched soil, about her open eyes. He didn't flinch, not once. He just stared at me for a long time and then said something that chilled me deeper than the grave had. "She hated being underground." It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. Not like a brother mourning a sister, but like someone confessing a terrible truth he'd tried to forget. I pressed him, asked what he meant. Asked if she'd ever spoken about death, about being buried, about returning. And then, as if something inside him cracked, he told me. Years ago, when they were children, Marin had gone missing for 3 days. Vanished into the woods near the cliffs. Everyone thought she'd fallen or worse. But on the 4th day she came back, alone, cold and different. She didn't speak for weeks, he said, voice low. She wouldn't eat. Wouldn't sleep unless someone held her hand. And one night I woke up and she was standing over me, just watching, whispering something I couldn't hear. Her lips moved, but no sound came out.
What?
He said their parents never talked about those days. And when they died, Marin changed again, became brighter, louder, normal. But he always remembered those eyes, the way she looked at graves. The way she never attended a single funeral in town, not even her best friend S. She used to say, he whispered, almost like he was afraid of the words themselves, the ground remembers who it traps, and it always wants more. What? I asked him if she'd ever been buried before. He didn't answer, just stared at his feet, hands trembling. And then he said, almost inaudibly, she made me promise if she ever died not to put her in the ground. And now I had. The next night I didn't go home. I stayed in the graveyard, not out of courage, no. I'd like to say I was brave, that I wanted answers, but really it was shame. I couldn't bear the thought of crawling back to that bed, knowing I'd buried someone who asked never to be buried. So I sat beneath the gnarled yew tree, lantern low, a flask at my side untouched, and I watched the grave. The wind had picked up by dusk, pulling the leaves into spirals, but I didn't move, didn't blink really. Just stared at the mound of earth as it slowly faded into shadow. The cemetery at night is not quiet. Most people think it is, still, solemn, peaceful. But that's only if you're not listening close. If you do listen, you'll hear it. The soil breathing like it remembers every name spoken over it. The creak of old stones not quite still. The distant rustle of something or someone moving between rows and sometimes whispering. I told myself it was the wind. Until I saw the figure. It stood maybe 15 paces from Marin's grave, unmoving, shrouded in the half-dark, half-light flicker of the lantern, too far to make out a face but close enough that I could feel it watching me. I stood. Called out, who's there? No answer, no step forward, no step back, just watching. I took one step toward it and it vanished, not behind a tree, not into the dark, gone, like smoke caught in a breeze. I ran around the stones. Between the rows, nothing, no footprints, no signs, only the cold pressing in like a second skin. When I turned back toward Marin's grave, the lantern flickered violently. I rushed back, heart pounding, and froze. The grave was disturbed. Not dug, not opened, but the soil it had sunk just slightly. The way fresh dirt settles, but it shouldn't have. I'd packed it myself, solid and clean. I leaned closer. There were scratches on the edge of the stone, not old ones, fresh. 4 lines, uneven, as if made by fingers or nails. Not climbing out, though, clawing to stay in. That night I didn't go home. I stayed in the chapel, doors locked, every candle lit. But even with the windows shut, even with the wind held outside, I swear I saw that figure again, reflected in the window behind me, closer this time. And this time it smiled. It rained the next morning. Hard, cold, relentless. The kind of rain that seeps through your coat, into your bones, until even your thoughts feel wet. I waited until the sun had risen, or at least until the sky was a lighter shade of gray. Then I took the spade. Not the rusted one, the new one, sharper, cleaner. I didn't want to ruin the grave, but some part of me, some part wanted to be sure. The churchyard was empty, no mourners today, no eyes, just me and the graves. I knelt beside Marin's. I told myself I was only checking, just a little, not all the way. I didn't want to be macabre, I didn't want to disturb the dead, but the dirt felt loose, too loose, as if it wanted to be opened. Each shovelful made my chest tighter. The earth gave way too easily. No resistance, like it had already been turned, like something or someone had already passed through. When I reached the coffin, the wood was damp. Not from the rain above, but from beneath. My fingers trembled as I slid the iron bar under the lid and forced it upward. It opened with a groan. Marin lay exactly as I had left her. Almost. Her hands were not crossed neatly like before. They were spread, palms up, fingers curled like claws, her eyes closed, thankfully, but there were scratches on the inside of the coffin lid. Deep ones, jagged, like she had woken and fought. But that was impossible. I had checked for breath, for pulse, for warmth. I had done everything right, hadn't I? I reached in hesitantly and gently took one of her hands. Beneath her fingernails, bits of earth, fresh. Something snapped behind me, a twig, a footstep. I jerked around, but saw no one. Only headstones, only wind, but the feeling returned, that presence, watching, closer than before. And then I realized it wasn't the grave that had been disturbed. It was her. She had moved herself. And if that was true, if she had been alive even for a moment, then I wasn't just a digger of graves, I was a murderer. I didn't rebury her right away. I couldn't. I just stood there staring at the scratches on the coffin lid, the clumps of wet soil packed beneath her fingernails, the grotesque stillness of her body. It wasn't the stillness of peace anymore, it was the stillness of something spent, something that had tried and failed to come back. I wanted to scream. I wanted to dig deeper into the earth beneath her, as if I'd find another explanation down there, some logical root that would pull this madness from my mind like a weed. But there was nothing below except more dirt and worms, and so I closed the lid again. Slowly, as if afraid she might open her eyes before it shut, I pressed the earth back down with trembling hands. Not the way I usually do, with care, with a prayer under breath, like tucking a child in for a final sleep. No, this time I shoved the soil back like I was sealing something away, like something needed to stay down there. Every thud of the spade felt like a question. What did you miss? What did you do? What if she was still alive when you walked away the first time? And yet, as I patted the top layer flat, something else crept in behind the guilt, a new weight. Heavier, stranger, a realization I couldn't quite explain. Marin's position in the coffin was not the only thing that had changed. The ring was gone. She had been buried with it, a simple silver band with a blue stone, a family heirloom, she'd said. She had clutched it even in death, fingers curled tight around it like it meant more than her own breath. But when I checked her hand, it wasn't there, not fallen beside her, not under her, it was simply gone. I told myself maybe the ring had slipped off, maybe the soil had taken it, but the doubt didn't leave me. It gnawed at me while I stood in the rain, mud soaking through my boots, watching the mound rise back into place. I didn't sleep that night, I didn't even undress. I sat by the hearth with a candle lit and my back to the wall, watching the door, listening. The village was quiet, save for the wind knocking loose branches against the windows. But I swear, at some hour deep into the night, I heard it, not footsteps, not wind, but a soft, wet sound, like fingers dragging through fresh earth. And when I finally closed my eyes just for a moment, just to rest them, I dreamed of Marin. She stood at the edge of the graveyard, her hair wet with rain, her skin gray with rot, but her eyes, God, her eyes were the same. They stared right at me, not in blame, not in sorrow, but as if she was trying to speak. As if she had one more thing to say, one more breath to give, if only I would listen. When I woke up, my door was open. The candle had burned itself out, and across the floor, muddy footprints, small, bare, leading toward my bed. I didn't touch the footprints. I couldn't. They were too precise, too real. Each toe etched in drying mud, smudged slightly at the heel like whoever left them had moved with hesitation. I followed them with my eyes, not my feet, afraid that stepping near would erase them or wake something I hadn't meant to see. They led straight to the edge of my bed, then vanished, not back to the door, not toward the hearth. Just stopped as if she had stood there watching me sleep and then dissolved into the night. I tried to convince myself it was a prank, a child with too much imagination and not enough fear, but the weight in the room said otherwise. It was the kind of weight that presses against your ribs, that makes your heartbeat echo in your teeth. And then I saw it, the water bucket. It sat where it always did, next to the door, half filled from the spring I'd drawn before sunset. But now it wasn't still. The surface rippled softly like something had just touched it. I walked over slowly, cautiously, my boots creaking louder than they ever had, and peered inside. At first, I didn't see anything. Just water, dark and deep. Then the flicker of candlelight caught it, a glint, and there it was at the bottom, Marin's ring, the same silver band, the same blue stone, unmistakable even through the distortion of the ripples. Sitting silently beneath the water as if it had always belonged there, as if it had followed me home. My breath caught in my throat, my hands didn't move. I just stood there, watching the ring lie still in the water, afraid to reach in. Afraid of what else might be waiting just beneath the surface. I didn't remember bringing it. I didn't remember taking it from her hand. But there it was, proof that she had moved. Proof that she had reached for something in death or after it. And now, whatever part of her was left wasn't resting in the ground. It had come with me. I didn't sleep for the next 3 nights. The footprints didn't return. But the ring wouldn't leave. Each morning I'd find it somewhere new, on the edge of the hearth, inside my coat pocket, next to my pillow. Once I buried it in the forest behind the chapel, deep beneath a hollow tree. I didn't mark the spot, I didn't turn back, and yet the next morning it lay on my breakfast plate, wet with soil, the blue stone gleaming like an open eye. Something had changed. The earth had taken her once. But someone was giving her back piece by piece. It was old Tomas, the bell ringer, who broke the silence first. I found him sitting alone on the chapel's back steps, long after the sun had gone down, a clay jug of sour cider cradled in his lap like a sleeping child. His face was red, not from drink, but from the cold that nipped every edge of stone in this place. He didn't look up when I approached, just stared out into the darkness as if he expected it to answer something he hadn't dared ask aloud. "You've seen her too, haven't you?" he rasped before I'd said a word. I froze, not because I didn't know what he meant, but because he did. Tomas had been around longer than anyone still breathing in that village. He rang the bells every morning at dawn and every evening at dusk. A routine man, never missed a beat, but tonight his hands shook and he didn't once look me in the eyes. "She came back," I whispered. He nodded once, slow. Like a man confessing something to the wind. "That grave's no good, never was. They buried her on the old line, the one that splits the blessed ground from the forest, half in consecrated soil, half where the old things sleep." "You don't remember that, do you?" "No, I didn't. No one had told me. She was too far gone to walk her the extra paces," he muttered. "Storm came in fast that night. Ground was flooding, so they laid her where they could. But we all knew." My mouth went dry. Knew what? He finally turned to me, and his eyes, God, his eyes were tired in a way bones remember, that the veil there is thin. I didn't know what to say. I dug countless graves. Some shallow, some proper, but I had never believed in more than soil and silence. Some folks, Tomas continued, don't cross over right, especially if they died hard. And Marin, his voice trailed off, she died harder than most. A wind howled low through the chapel's broken shutters, making the old bell shudder above us, not tolling, just shifting, like it was listening. She was the last of her name, he said. That family line was cursed to walk halfway. They used to say if a body like that touches both sides of the land, it can't settle, can't decide, so it lingers, slips in and out, tries to find a shape again. She's moving, I whispered, the words barely a breath, every night. Tomas didn't blink, then it's not her doing it. I felt my spine stiffen. She's not trying to be seen, he said, leaning closer, the stench of cider and cold clinging to him. Something else is wearing her. Borrowing the body like an old coat. You ever seen a skin that doesn't rot? I had, God help me, I had. She ain't rising, he said at last, his voice now just a murmur lost in the dark. She's being puppeted. The bell above us swayed once more. No wind, no rope, just the faint creak of iron. Something had heard its name, and it was answering. I couldn't sleep. Even with the windows barred and every candle lit until wax puddled across the table like spilled bone, the feeling stayed with me, coiled in my chest, behind my ribs, whispering up through the hollows of my ears. Tomas's words echoed long after he'd staggered back into the chapel's shadows. She's not trying to be seen, something else is wearing her. The image crawled through my thoughts like rot. The body I'd buried still, pristine, untouched by time or decay, shifting not because of some spirit's unrest, but because something was animating it. Not to haunt, but to hunt. By midnight, I'd made my decision. I threw on my coat, grabbed the lantern and the shovel I swore I'd never use again, and stepped into the graveyard's hush. Every footstep sounded louder than it should, crunching on frozen earth, pressing through air so thick it hummed with anticipation. Fog clung low to the ground, and the stars above blinked like they, too, wanted to look away. The grave waited for me, second row from the chapel, third stone to the left. I'd memorized it without meaning to. Even before all of this, that spot always felt wrong, too quiet, too heavy. The grass around it refused to grow, as if roots themselves were afraid to dig too deep. I set down the lantern. It flickered once, then held. My breath steamed out in short bursts as I began to dig. The soil, once damp and pliant, had hardened like it was trying to hold her in. Every shovelful fought back, not with weight, but with intent. As if the earth had made its decision and I was trespassing on a pact it did not want broken. It took longer than it should, but finally the wood appeared. The coffin was intact, no sign of movement, no crack or claw mark. Just the same iron-handled lid I'd nailed shut with trembling hands 5 nights ago. But when I leaned closer, I heard it, a breath, not a groan, not wind, a slow, deliberate inhale from within. I froze, mouth open, unable to swallow, unable to scream. My fingers, traitorous things, reached out, touched the lid. It was warm and rising, a pulse, beneath the wood, rhythmic, beating. Then something tapped back, once, twice. A slow, deliberate rhythm. The same pattern Tomas used to ring the bell every morning. I recoiled, tripped, fell backwards into the dirt as the coffin lid began to shift, not burst open, not shatter, but simply slide as though whoever, or whatever, was inside had fingers precise enough to open it gently. I didn't wait to see the face. I ran. I left the shovel, left the lantern, left the hole gaping behind me like a wound in the world. But as I stumbled back toward the chapel, lungs screaming and boots soaked in thawed mud, I heard something I'll never forget. The sound of a woman's voice, calm, measured, not angry, not cruel, just awake. I was wondering when you'd come back. I don't remember running back to the chapel. I don't remember fumbling the key, or how I found myself locked inside the vestry, back against cold stone, heart hammering like it wanted to escape my ribs. All I remember was her voice, not a scream, not a moan, just that gentle, knowing whisper. I was wondering when you'd come back. As if she'd been waiting, as if this was always part of the plan. The bells didn't ring that morning. No one showed up for prayer, and when I finally dared to peek through the shutters, the fog hadn't lifted. It had only thickened, swallowing the trees, the path, even the sky. A pale, gray world now, like the graveyard, had bled into the village itself. But what made me truly afraid was not what I saw, it was what I didn't, the graves. The ones I'd tended for years, the rows, the symmetry, the quiet order of death, they were wrong. Some had shifted, not dug up, not disturbed by animals, moved. One grave, where old Marin had been buried last spring, was now a hollow. Her stone tipped sideways like a discarded tooth. Another, Brother Elric's, had 2 headstones now. The second bore no name, just a crude carving of a spiral burned into the surface. A mark I'd never seen in scripture or lore or anywhere in the records, but then I saw my name etched into fresh stone with today's date, and beneath it a line that made my knees give, returned, not redeemed. I staggered back. I don't know how long I knelt there in the mud, the fog licking at my face, but eventually I heard it, not one bell, but many. Not from the tower above, but from the ground below, muffled chimes, dozens, maybe hundreds. Ringing in slow, discordant harmony, I pressed my ear to the earth and my blood went cold. There were voices, not screams, not cries, hymns they were singing. Low, guttural, like lungs filled with soil, words I didn't understand. A language older than the stone walls of the chapel, older than prayer, a liturgy for the not quite dead, and in the midst of it, layered between the harmonies, I heard one voice clearer than the rest, her voice, closer now. I told you, she whispered as the fog curled around my ankles. We don't stay buried here, we listen, we learn. A soft hand brushed my shoulder from behind, and the last thing I felt was warm breath against my neck.